We had a little technical glitch, but we are now broadcasting live to our destination. So, without any further ado, Bernard, let's hop right into it.
All right. You see yourself live?
I I see that it just said that I'm live officially, which is the first time it's done it. So, let's see. Yeah, I do. I see us.
All right. Well, sorry, Clubhouse. Been anything I hate is time wasted, so I definitely don't want to make other people. All right. So internal imagination versus external imagination. So one day I was thinking about how why is it so frustrating to talk to certain people when it comes to explaining things, and then it hit me. I was like, oh, my mind is so imaginative that I can literally think of anything you explain. You could, in a meeting, people are saying things. I'm just like, like I don't need someone to draw it out for me. I mean, sometimes, like, there's every now and then someone has to like diagram or show you something. You're like, oh, okay, I see it now. But most of the time, just in my head going, yeah, I got it. And so I've always been frustrated when there's people who don't seem to just get it. They're like, what do you mean?
Oh,
So then I
gosh.
was like, oh, I get it. For some people, it's as if the world outside their head is their version of imagination.
Mm,
So I started using that term external imagination. So one, it's helpful because whenever I have to do some kind of pitch or grant, I'm always like, include a picture, include a graph, include a diagram, even if it's not of the actual event. Like they just want
right.
to grasp something. It could be a stock photo, but they need to literally see it to believe it. So I think for
Right.
introverts, we generate images in our head
Yep.
and then we make things outside. We're like, I imagine it, I'm thinking it, I rotate it. Okay, now I'm going to craft it, draw it, build it, whatever. I think for the extrovert, it's like they have to see the thing, the prototype, the sketch, the picture, the example, the past video of the camp. And it's like then the image becomes, you know, present in their mind in that moment. But as soon as
Mm-hmm.
you take it away, it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like hologram, Star Trek, it's there, or like X-Men, it's like, when they do the powers and they're like, ugh, and then the power's done. Because I think I also think about that for extroverts. I think extroverts very much that's how they are in community. Like they don't really find the context and the meaning till they're in community. They show up and they're like, oh, I know who I am now in relation to Pro or to
Mm.
Joe or Mark or Sarah. Then as soon as they leave community, it's like their identity kind of goes or kind of stays there, and they have to like regroup to like find identity. So I think it's a similar thing with the imagination. It's like they don't see the thing until it's placed in front of them, and then it like activates their mind.
Mm.
But here's what I was thinking about today, which was kind of the opposite, because I've already thought about that, but today I was like, because you and I have talked about this. It's like if we see something coming on screen, we're like, yeah, I don't really need to see that. Like, I'm good. We're like, I don't like. It's like your imagination. It's weird because it's like someone's presenting to you an external image on a movie, and your imagination is very strong. But for whatever reason, you're like, I don't need to see that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was thinking the opposite. I was like, why is it also that I feel like nowadays when you have to explain things to people, you always have to be like, "Hey guys, sorry, I don't know if this is like crass or this is too shocking." And but what if someone got stabbed? I know that was I, kn- I
Mm.
always find I never felt the need for someone to tell me like, sorry, I hope this isn't too shocking. Like, what are you talking about?
Right.
Like you're just describing something. You would think I would react because I have such a vivid imagination, right? You think I'd be like, yeah, don't talk about that because I'm going to imagine it. So I was wondering like, is it the opposite, right? For the extroverts, is it like
Mm.
in if you show them something like if you show or introverts like you show us something we're like, oh, I don't want to see it, but
Right.
maybe for the extroverts, like I don't know, something very jarring, like they can imagine it. So I don't know, it's kind of weird. Like there's these like I said opposites because I'm not easily disturbed. Usually, I guess it depends on what it is too. Because there's certain movies I'll watch because I'm filtering it through my imagination. I'm like, okay, I'm watching this movie. It's harsh, but I'm gonna turn it into song or poetry or whatever. But I never feel the need for someone to kind of give like a trigger warning, like
Yeah.
trigger warning,
Here it
because
comes.
so what do you think about this internal, external, and then the swaps?
I mean, it makes me want to ask you a question up front. How do you feel about books? Would you rather that they have a lot of illustrations or don't?
I think just for the sake of I like my imagination, probably no pictures because I don't know. I like to create my own world.
Right, right. I did in my self-made book. I did one picture each chapter, and it was just to start the chapter because I felt I was connecting it back to the album, and the one picture was relatively vague. And I tried to find the best one that sort of represented that chapter out of the photo shoot that we did. Actually, it's sticking in my drawer. So, like, there's a cover, there's a back cover, and then each one is, start the thing, and then there'd be the lyrics. Trying to find a picture in there, but they were, they were kind of vague. Like that picture, if you can see it, is just a pen on a notebook. You know what I mean?
Right.
Others might be a shot that Raymond got of me somewhere. Right there, I am on top of a building or whatever. And I don't think it's giving away anything because it wasn't like, it wasn't totally made to. We weren't like, oh, let's take this picture for chapter 3. Books that do that sometimes will put in a picture here and there. I don't mind if they're like guideposts and that they're not too telling. The reason I asked too is similarly, I don't like a book that's, even since I was a young kid, I don't like too many pictures in the book. However, I also have learned to adapt to the pictures in the book. People will say, if you see a video, does it ruin the song for you? No, it doesn't. It creates almost like a parallel dimension for me. Like I have a video thought up in my head if I haven't seen it first. I do it for my songs as well. And I'm excited when someone gives me a whole different vision on a video that I never would have thought of. I'm like, oh,
Right.
that's dope. Like I didn't think about that. I mean, we recently were just doing, some video stuff, and you pose it to people. You're like, hey, what do you think? And sometimes you don't get robust answers, but you give people a little bit of time to think. They come up with something that will allow you to kind of bring in the compliment. But yeah, I'm with you too. Like when I'm, whether it's a meeting, to answer your question, if somebody is trying to paint the picture, it's like, bro, I got it. You know what I'm saying? Like, like
Right.
the little piece of me's dying every second or so. I just can't wait for them to finish. I'm like, I don't need help in the visual, kind of creation. Like I get it. I can really follow along with the auditory if I'm fully invested in what's being said. If it's not being said, then I'm checking out and I'm creating stories in my head. That's the problem. So if somebody loses me early on, it's hard for me to actually develop that picture because I'm like, oh, this is of no interest to me and it's not going. So I've been in those situations. It's almost embarrassing, right? Someone would be like, yo, what are you thinking? Like, I was totally not listening to you because you lost me in the first five
Right.
seconds, but yeah, like I find myself sending pictures to introverts of this conference that's coming up that I want some people to go to. And, I'm like, I keep sending it to them because it has this visual in it. And I'm like, the visual is exactly what I thought it was going to be, And I'm like, I don't need the visual stimuli. I just need to hear what it was going to be because I can imagine what it's going to be like. Sometimes you want that picture if you're going to go stay somewhere and you're going to spend money or something. You want to see if it matches up. But for the most part, yeah, I don't feel like the roadmap that someone's trying to paint is necessarily always needed. And
Right.
sometimes it can be distracting. But I've never thought of it in that light, though. I mean, admittedly, I've never thought of it from that viewpoint. Like maybe that is what's happening. Maybe it is the extrovert introvert kind of thought with that. I've never considered it before, so it's an interesting way to present
Right.
it.
For just Clubhouse, Joe saying, I guess it's kind of hard to hear you, and that whatever that hum noise is
Oh, is it back?
back,
Let's
or
see.
it like hums as you talk,
Oh, okay. Let's
like
try
it kind
this.
of
1, 2. Is it humming right now? 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
keep talking.
1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Yeah, some I don't know. I don't know if you got some kind of electrical interference or something. It's not
Maybe.
as bad as it was earlier, but it's that
Okay.
kind of like it comes in and out.
Still humming, huh? Let's try.
Yeah,
Let me unplug here and then plug back in and see what happens. Um,
yeah, that sounds clean.
that's that's better.
Well, it was for a second. Now it's
I was trying to avoid the Bluetooth over there because I was figuring that it would do a delay. I mean, the other option is I can do the Bluetooth, but or
I think I hear you now. Like whatever you're doing,
Oh, I
talk.
just I unplugged though. Hold on.
But I can hear you.
One, two. You hear me well now or no?
I mean, I hear you now,
Okay.
but it's got the hum again.
It's something with a wire. Then it's a newer connector thing I have. So hold
But I
on.
mean, I a second ago when you unplugged or whatever, I could still hear you with no hum.
Hmm.
Like talk now.
Now there's probably
Well,
no hum.
no,
Is
the
there no
hum is
hum?
there. It's even worse.
Oh wow.
Now I
Okay.
can't
So
hear
it's
you, and it's
so it's
worse.
so it's definitely this little adapter piece.
All right, I can hear you now, and it's clean.
Yeah, but the problem is we're gonna hear the feedback unless I turn the thing all the way down. Let's try. 1 2 1 2. Talk.
I can hear you. I can hear you. No
One.
hum.
Yeah, but there's gonna be the. Well, I'm gonna have to play the game I normally do with that thing.
All right.
So I'll be able to do it though. I'll be able to work it.
Um, but the other thing is, all right, to your point about the pictures, though, I actually thought about that with, um, because I always talk about how I think the school system kind of favors, well, the classroom of the school system favors the introvert, and then like the halls I think favor the extrovert. It's like no socializing, we're here to learn, and then once everybody gets out in the hall, they want to talk because they don't get to socialize. Now that's why everybody's so big on SEL, social emotional learning. Because like, yeah, because you took out the social and emotional part, so now you're putting it back in. So I think kids go to school. If you're introvert, you're like, great, this is my territory, at least in the classroom, teacher's pet, good grades. But outside, it's like, oh, you maybe get made fun of, and then vice versa for the extroverts. Like, oh, I'm cool out in the halls, but then when I get in class, someone might make me feel dumb. So I think I see this connection between school and then lack of reading after school. Like most people I talk to, I'm just still in shock of like how nobody reads. Like like sometimes it amazes me. I was like, oh, you actually don't read anything. Um, and so I think when you go to school, it's like, yeah, you have all these books that are dense with text and you're forced to read and teach you got to read 100 pages by next week. College, like they pride you on reading a lot. And then when people get out of school, I mean, I know students who were like, it's like, I hate reading. I'm never reading it. Like they despise reading. And so I think that's why people only do things like watch videos, watch TV, because they just want to see images now. They don't want blocks of text. Like if you type something on social media, people are like, oh, this is way too long. I'm like, this is too long. This is like it's like a little paragraph. Oh, I'm not reading all of that. I'm just like all of that. So I do think there's something there too. Like if you're extrovert in some ways, there's probably a sense of visual connection that you want to see in the book. There's probably also a sense of I want to talk and touch, be tactile with people and humans. And so you're not getting that and you're just being inundated with text. You graduate high school, college, and then you hate text and you only look at pictures. You only look at posts. And then your mind gets a lot atrophied, because when people ask you information, you don't actually know the content. You know the image that someone has posted. And so then you go out, everybody's talking about that now, misinformation. It's like it's not even misinformation. I think it's no information. Like people don't have any information. So I think people really rely on imagery, because their brains are so fried from school. And so, yeah, it seems like there needs to be a reverse. Like, okay, get back into schools with more pictures and more color. I think it's almost like I think people I think people shy away from pictures because they think that means elementary. Like, oh, when you were a little kid, you had picture books. Now you're getting to be an adult. Like, you got to be smart. You got to read text. Like, you can't just look at pictures, because people will make that joke. Like, oh, do we have to give you the picture book so you can learn, the content? So I think, yeah, it definitely should be more of a balance.
Right. Can you hear me okay now? I think it should be better in Clubhouse. Should be. I think it is pretty good, right?
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Um, I just have a little delay I deal with. It's like a 1 second delay with the Bluetooth. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I don't know how much you can see behind me. Maybe I can make this thing a little bigger. Let me see. So there's temporarily, that's my background. For people that are on Clubhouse is basically a bunch of, records. I got some comic book stuff on my back table there. I got some Marvel stuff, my little Star Wars stuff. Like it's this. It's not that I need any of that stuff to be creative. It's that
Right.
I want to be creative in this particular space. It's like my little happy place. And I I'm always working to clean and organize a certain area so I don't have any. My brain isn't worried about something else. It isn't that I can be in complete filth and chaos and be just fine. But
Right.
I'm looking forward to the process. I can get there. I'm efficient. What I look forward to it. And that's part of it, like tricking ourselves to be looking forward to be doing our creative time so that it doesn't feel like a burden. Sometimes, we're not disciplined and before you know it, we say, I'm just going to do this for 15 minutes and it turns into like 5 hours. And I'm guilty of that. So I think when we're more organized and we're more central in an area that is organized, it should also be creative and fun, not just structure. And so I try to create those environments for myself. But I think about young people, and kind of to your point, it's like, okay, if there's pictures, do we squeeze the fun out of it by taking away? I think there's so many opportunities now to do interactive multimedia kind of things. Like, I was talking about this in another room at Clubhouse today. I was talking about the model of the music industry, and I was like, isn't it time for like the publishing model to change? Like, can it just be one stop that we can go in and kind of just like create the cover, do our publishing, make the song, get published, have it come out, be the person that does the, just the one stop kind of, okay, here's my design. Just put it all in one format and just
Right.
everything be uploaded and be there, and you're in kind of control of everything. You don't got to wait for everybody else. Maybe like an assembly line, maybe like cover goes here, boom. Do you have a cover? No. Do you need graphics? Sure. Do you want to make your own, a la
Right.
Adobe Creative Cloud kind of thing? And allowing, in other words, in this case, the learner or the musician to be central to the process. Why not similar in a multimedia rich environment that we should be having in a lot of our educational places? Let the user dictate how much or how little they want. In other words,
Right.
like, do you want pictures? No. Do you want the preloaded pictures? Would you like a chance to design one yourself?
Right.
And I know we're talking pie in the sky, but whenever we can create those environments for the student as the majority of time. In other words, if the majority of time I get to create in this room, I'm looking forward to it. The
Right.
exception when I don't, I'm like, oh, well, I still know I'll get back to my happy place. If a student's coming to school every day and they're like, I know that I have a choice board, or I'm in sort of control of what things are going to be, like maybe the pictures are something that just the teacher has. And
Right.
so she shares them only with students who want to see them. I mean, why not? Why not? Customization is definitely the way things are going.
Right.
So then maybe you'd have students more captive because you could get sort of both swaths of the learner types, and bring them along for the ride. I think it'd be cool to have a book that is like, hey, turn to the end if you want to see turn to page 80 if you want to see the picture that goes with it. We don't want to spoil it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, it could be cool.
I mean, I don't think it's pie in the sky. I mean, there's this thing I discovered called Veed, which is podcasting, like kind of like this restreamer on. And when you open it up, I mean, it literally has all types. It has picture, video, transcription, uh, like icons, graphics, and it's like your one, like you're saying, it's one stop shop. You can make a video,
Yeah.
and you can drag over
Yeah.
like GIFs. And I was like, this to me
This
is
This does too. This has a lot. I mean, we just
right,
don't use too much. I mean, look,
right,
at any given time, we can jump in with what we want. If we can, well, I got to get rid of my picture here so that we're both back in. But we can throw
right,
whatever we want back here. We can take over the screen with, hey, we're gonna do.
right,
It's all embedded in there
right.
at your fingertips, like you said.
But to me, when as soon as I discovered that Veed, I was like, man, this would be like. I was like, someone should take. I thought about it myself. I was like, I should create a curriculum around this thing because so you could literally teach anything you want. Like, oh, you're doing science. Okay, kids, you guys are gonna do like a 5-minute podcast. You got animated GIFs, you got text transcription software, you got audio clips, you got like to me, that is the future. It's not even the future, it's now.
Yeah,
And
it's
like
now. Yeah,
that's the thing that's so frustrating too, is like everybody talks about technology in school, like kids are using technology. Like, okay, like that's like that's the one, that's the era they grew up in, but it's also we shouldn't be talking about technology as if it's like this virtue we're achieving. It's like
Right.
you don't do that in your life. I'm using the microwave. I'm using the washer and dryer. Like you're just like, this is what we do. But in school,
Yeah.
it's like an anomaly. Like, and kids are using iPads. Like,
Right.
and
Right.
right,
Let's write an article about how
right.
novel it is. Right. Right.
So, but to me, that Veed software makes me think of like this is like multi. I can't I always what's the word? It's like multi-dimension. That's the word I always go to. Multi-dimensional or uh multi everything.
Mm.
Like this is a band called May. They're from Norfolk, Virginia, and May stood for aesthetic multi-aesthetic sensory experiments. I guess the aesthetic sensory was like one. But so one of the guys who started the band, I think his thesis was like, you know, philosophy, theology, psychology, science. He was like, when you're listening to music, what is the meaning you're pulling from the music philosophically, but also like
Mm.
synesthesia. So that idea of multi-aesthetic sensory makes me think of, I remember in physics when I was in high school, the teacher had a thing on the desk. It's like, you remember 60% of what you see, 30% of what
Mm.
you hear, 10% of what you
Right.
read. And I was like, oh yeah, I was like, that's cool. Then you got different kinds of learners, like kinesthetic learners, and some people are
Yeah.
more visual. And so there's all these layers. Then you get into what's his name, Garner, and the multiple intelligences. So
Right.
all this stuff to me just makes me think of that whole, I just think of like a 360. I always use the word 360. Like we live in a
Yeah. Yeah.
360 world. So why is everything always flattened, right? Like
Well,
everything,
yeah. Yeah.
especially in school, it's like we're going to sit you in front of a desk and a board, flatten your mind, flatten the information, and then expect you to go out and apply it in the world. It's like, but I
Yeah.
actually have to like I was thinking about this yesterday. I was like, think about, it's like when they show you that video, like what happens, how does a bill get passed, and they show you the path of like where it goes.
Yeah.
I should do a video like that with knowledge. It's like, where does knowledge come from? It's like from some PhD's mind to the paper to a book to somebody else's mind to a meeting to the teacher who teaches it onto the board on to the kid's head to the paper back to the teacher's mind. Like it never leaves the mind. Like it never leaves the mind space. Never goes into the external imagination.
Mm. Well, again, it makes me think of, I was talking about another room earlier, talking about my man Sin was talking about, you can own the master recording, but you actually own the song, right? Like meaning that you own the creative composition, right? And when you own the creative composition, it's like, where does the creative composition? It was just making me think, where does that live? That's not anything physical. Like we create a song right now, like that song. I mean, it's physical, I guess, when we turn it into waves and put it in wave files and stuff like that. But otherwise, we own the creative idea of what the melody is. It's
Right.
kind of floating in the ether, And it's funny if you think about even the process with songs. Songs don't feel like they're real until there's a picture, little icon that goes with them now on your Spotify or whatever, and or video. And normally the video is driving the song at this era. To your 60% point. It's like if you don't have a song, if you don't have a video, if you don't have some kind of captivating image, you're only doing like a half justice. And I've been guilty of that on the musical side for like almost the whole career. I'd be like, video is the kind of last thing I'm thinking about. I'm like, I'm here though. You know what I'm saying? Like the 7 people that are here, or the 70, or the 700, or the 7,000, they all get to see it. And it's like, yeah, but what about the people after? What about it's that whole multimedia world? It's like, what about when someone wants to use what you were just saying in their class 6 years later? And
Right.
it's like, okay, that's compelling. The more you can overload the senses, the better. And you think about even, when you think about the Oculus headsets and, Meta and all this kind of stuff. I
Right.
mean, the reason Facebook went so hard on Meta is because of this point. It's because we're going from increasingly, like, as you said, to use the word flat, we're going from flat to spherical as much as we possibly can and immersive. And because we know that overload to your senses makes it real. For instance, like, we can use you and I. Like, I mean, we didn't physically meet each other until relatively recently, but it's like when you meet someone finally,
Right.
is it like it's not that big of a deal now because this is much closer than what we used to have, which would be a phone or a letter. You know what I'm saying? And you go from a phone to a letter, and then you work with someone on the phone a lot. Then you're working in Zoom. you're working in, live streams, and you're in Clubhouse, and before you know it, it's like you almost have the 360 on the person. Granted, it's not the same, but it's like you're pretty close. You know what I mean? And imagine now we throw in, you can feel and you can touch, which of course that's part of the
Right.
whole immersive experience. And it's just hard to imagine going back. It's hard to imagine what it will feel like for learners in the future that will demand that at every time. And then going back, it's like, are we ever going back to the 8-track? No. Are we ever going back to rotary phones because of the nostalgia? No.
Right.
There's no one selling rotary phones, right? Maybe there's 0.0000001% of the phones are rotary for, I don't know, for museums or something like that, or people that just want to have like a throwback. But other than that, you don't go back. When the technology gets, people like, oh, the old days, and it's like, the old days kind of sucked. Like in a lot of, in a lot, in a lot of cases, like there's nothing about right now that I don't like compared to 25 years ago, except for the fact that we do lose a bit of sort of that social interaction that we know is critical for human development. I
Right.
understand that. I get that. But I mean, that's kind of the whole thing this show is based on. It's like, well, how much of that do we really need? It's like how much
Right.
do we really? We want the 360 immersive experience, but I also want to be able to shut it off whenever I want to, and I also want to be able to say this is encapsulated over here. It's my whole thing with you watching Westworld. It's like Westworld kind of hits on these points. It's like, what is real, right? And how close do we need to get? Even with, they're talking with humans and androids, right? They're like, what is the difference at the end of the day? If you could make AI that is 100% sentient, kind of like in every sense of the word, at what point do you even care? Like, and then it
Right.
gets to the point when you die and your Android copies it, the Android doesn't even know it's an Android. And it's like the Android doesn't think of itself as an Android until it's really pointed out for them. And then they become like, quote unquote, conscious of the whole thing. But, the bigger point there is it's like, we can also at some point say, yeah, we have enough of what we need right now. I get the picture, which is your intro point. I get the picture pretty quickly on a couple clues. I'm like, oh, I got this, and I'm a pain to watch a movie with because I'm extrapolating, going right to the end of the movie. And
Right.
I have to, I have to know that I'm a poor person to watch a movie with and quell that and just shut up, and just be like, okay, I gotta sit here and don't be saying that to my wife. She's gonna kick me out of the room. She's gonna say, go watch that downstairs. Can't watch a movie with you. It's because of that. What you're saying, we do that all the time. Like, and it
Right.
makes it almost not fun.
Right. Well, yeah, it's funny you say it because like until I got like once I learned how to make films, it's like I can't watch a movie anymore. It's like I'm just oh
Right.
man, how did they do that shot? Oh, it took so long to do that. But it's funny you even mentioned that because today I was just thinking it's like I'm not surprised by much. I mean,
Mm.
it would. I wish someone could surprise me, honestly. But I was just thinking today, I was like, I watch things and I'm just like, I see people's facial expressions and I'm just like that was a shock to you. I mean, I'm not just talking about movies or TV shows. Just like watching sports events. People are like, oh, he was out. I was like, yeah, he stepped out of bounds. I just like it's just, I'm just not really surprised by much. But
Yeah.
is the interesting thing. Okay, so let's take it back to the like we were mentioning films, videos, 2D, 3D. So what's interesting is okay when I teach film like the workshop you've been doing with me. One
Mhm.
thing I tell the students is like, look, when you're filming a video, a film, a movie, I was like, I know it's counterintuitive to do certain things like move the camera right up on the person's face or have them stand at an awkward angle. I was like, but you have to realize you're here. You're in the three-dimensional
You're the
area and
360. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're here
Exactly.
right now and you see the camera angle and the naked eye. But when this goes
Mm.
onto the screen, the audience wasn't there to be like, "Oh yeah, context. That guy, the boom pole was in the way." Like,
Mhm.
that's the whole point. You don't want to see the boom pole. You don't want to see the lighting. You don't want to see that stuff
Mhm.
because it's not a movie. So I tell them
Mhm.
you have to do certain things on purpose that are weird in order to make it come across as normal as possible to the
Mhm.
audience.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Mhm.
when you talk about back into the internal imagination, there is this power in there that yeah, you can flatten things. Like I said, like if you watch, if you draw a cartoon or imagine someone jumping off a building and getting splat and flat, it's like, oh, you can do that because it's safe. You can squash someone in your mind or on the paper,
Right.
and it's
Right.
okay. And that's kind of the power of art. But that was kind of the reverse of your point where you were talking about like how much like do we want to go into this three-dimensional world? And it's like, yeah, there's a certain amount of, well, three-dimensional world as in the world we literally live in. Because yeah, I mean, there's something that can't be substituted. Like there's just something can't be substituted for being in
Mm-hmm.
someone's presence, and it could be a fraction. Like I
It's a
always talk
fraction.
about,
It's a small fraction.
it's just that one little percent. But when you see someone in person, you're like, ah, oh, you are real. You have depth. Okay,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hear your
It's a
voice.
cool.
Oh,
It's a cool little feeling. Yeah.
so it's. I mean, that's. I think that's especially like exaggerated since the pandemic. I mean, even before people want to see people in person, but when people had that, denied of them, they like craved it. So yeah, I think there's that one little percent that just makes you say like, oh yeah, like this is an actual human. I mean, this gets into empathy and everything too, because I always talk about that. It's like I watch all these documentaries of people who are racist, and then they're in presence of someone face to face for a week, and they're like, oh man, I
They're
can't do
actually
this.
human.
I can't do this anymore because I have met
Mm.
you face to face as a three-dimensional being and not a cartoon character. I mean, think about, you watch the news, you watch footage of certain people groups your whole life, and they're just cartoon. I mean, they're literally, like I said, they're flat. They're on your flat
Right.
screen TV. So all you know is what you see of them in a flat way,
I
pictures,
still got the curve.
newspaper, TV, phone, everyone is flattened. But that moment that extruded head is in your face, you're like, oh, this person is like in my grill. Like I can feel their breath. I can hear. I mean, that's why music is so important. Like just sound waves bouncing off the wall where you're like, oh, I'm here. Like I hear your voice. I mean, you know that too, like context, like you have a conversation with somebody online and then you meet them face to face and you're like, oh, I can't, I wanted to punch you, but I can't now because there's like a
I hate
living,
on you.
it's like a living, breathing human in front of me and I feel bad now.
Right. 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 Yeah. It's. I mean, I like that you use the word fraction too, because I was thinking about that too. I'm like, what percentage or what fraction of this is important? It's clearly important. It's just that, you know, it's really close to what you expect. Like if it wasn't, it'd be like catfish situation all the time, right? It'd be
Right.
like people have to intentionally be deceiving you. But for the most part, you meet someone. I mean, you might be like, oh wow, like, well, Bernard's taller than I thought he'd be, or like blah blah blah. You're someone skinnier or something like that. But outside of that, it's like the essence of that person. You feel like you kind of know, and
Right.
I know it's a little bit from the original topic, but I think that is part of it when we're talking about internal imaginations and external imaginations. It's like, being able to project what you think is a life skill. You can call it evolutionary, you can call it protective. We have to be able to make predictions about the world that are as accurate as possible for us to perpetuate ourself. If we were bad at that, we wouldn't cross the street with much success, because you're picturing, you're going, oh, I'm going to make it now. I'm not going to get hit. You know, if you ever get that wrong, that's a life
Right.
ending decision. Right. And so we have to be, by nature, all of us have to be able to imagine what's going to happen and i.e. predict. Predict sounds very mathematical, but it doesn't have to be. We can certainly predict something off of mathematics and probability and so forth, and know the actual numbers and what it would be. But we do it every day. Every decision that we make is really a prediction based on our senses. It always brings me to, whenever I talk about imagination and thinking about, internal and external. I mean, we've talked about this a couple of times, and I've been thinking more about it lately. It's just the whole, because again, it comes up in the quantum world so often. It's like, quantum world suggests that there is no local reality. Um, the the math, as much as we do it, keep running it over and over, and this idea that you can't rule out the possibility that things are not there unless they're being perceived, because that's what the data seems to show us. It seems to show perception is causing our so-called reality. Think about that. Perception is causing our so-called reality, which would mean there's no objective reality, which
Right.
is counterintuitive to everything science is supposed to be the bedrock on, right? Um, you think about that, and then you think about, okay, if it's the tree in the woods thing, it's if I look up and I see the moon, room? Is it not there if there's not someone looking at it? This is, I mean, the wild part is that quantum sort of hints that that's what the underlying truth is.
Right.
That until we take a measurement, there is nothing definitive about that action. There is a multitude of probabilities that could happen, and it's when we come into the universe with a measuring stick that thing sort of has to make a decision. That's crazy, and it brings me back to the other discussions you had, like, maybe your red is different than my red. And I was thinking about that harder, and I may have been incorrect with my thought the other. I was just out walking the dog, and I was that's what I was thinking about. Thinking about people, the old adages about certain animals being colorblind or not having color in your dreams. I know proof positive I see color in my dreams. But then I'm like, well, maybe I'm just imagining seeing color in my dreams. Sure. And then I'm like, well,
Right.
what's the difference?
Right.
Right? Like my eyes are closed, so I'm
Right.
not actually seeing color. My brain is imagining what red would be there. So it's like, in a way, yeah, it's true. There is no color in my dreams. There's no anything because they're just wave patterns. But then you think about what is vision. Vision's the same thing. It's like the object doesn't have any color in it. Our brain projects the reading of the wavelength to say, I'm going to make this red for you. So there's no need for your red to be the same as mine. But the only thing your red could be blue, my blue could be red. We both call them red forever. The only thing that would be weird about is like when we say, like, oh, light, like we're looking at light. Like light clearly to all of us is what we would call bright, as
Right.
opposed to dark. There are certain sensations that we know that are possible with light and dark, but it's everything in between black and white that could be completely off. It would be pretty weird if bright was actually dark for some people and dark was, because everything we know is like, we feel a warmth when we go towards the sun, right? When it's not there, we know that we feel a cold. So there's a bunch of other sensations that come with us at those very, very opposite ends of the spectrum. But everything in the middle, it's like, who knows? I could be off about my thinking there in the end. So I haven't really given it much thought, but it's like it would seem that a light color as opposed to a dark color um, would be odd because of just shade projections and different kinds of things that happen, like different kinds of sensations that happen that we can all verify. But then it's like, okay, you go down the rabbit hole. And it's like, or what about the sensation itself that you experience? Like maybe your word for that sensation is based upon your reality of what that actual color is and what that sensation is like. So
Right.
it's tough to know. It's really tough to know. And it really underpins all this discussion.
Well, it's interesting. I doubt you're on Twitter. That doesn't seem like the place you'd be on, but I've always had a Twitter.
I am somewhere.
Okay. I've always had an account because I was just always like, oh, I want to have these in case they ever like try to make you pay for them, and that was like years ago. So recently, instead of doing Clubhouse, I'll be just like on Twitter Spaces because there's like a change of space, change of pace. And so I would just record some rooms on there. And this week, I did a series on what you're talking about. I called it what did I call it? I called it like, oh, infinity equals creativity. Because I sent you that.
I like that.
I sent you that link to.
We're on Twitter right now. We're on my Twitter page.
All right, I sent you the link. Hopefully, I can get those recordings off, or Elon destroys it. But what up, Tree? In the middle of something right now. But yeah, we haven't been here in a while. So okay, the first half of the show, Tree, is technical solving, so you can fast forward.
Yeah.
But
no, actually, it only went live late into it, like, so you don't have to worry about it. The only thing you're going to see is it just pops on at some random time.
Okay, so I Infinity, because I sent you that video from PBS Nova about Zero and Infinity.
Yes, which I started watching way more than I'd like to admit. I watched probably like 40 minutes of it in one sitting.
No, it was great. Like I just caught it on TV, and I was like, okay. But that thing got me thinking when they were talking about Infinity. They were like, oh yeah, you can count to infinity. And I was like, why? Why do we have this thing called infinity that we can't really count to, but we have a thing to represent it? I was like, that seems very strange. Mm-hmm. And I always talk about things like we have the ability to imagine things that we know we can't even imagine.
Right.
Right. And like, to me, I like, that's the doorway to infinity. That's the doorway to God. Like, that's the doorway to the unknown. Like the fact that you can even have that thought. I can think about a thing that I can't think about, let you know that there's something there. Like you may not be able to
Wait,
understand
say
it.
that again. That was a mouthful.
I was like, the fact that you can think about a thing that you can't actually think about lets you know that there's something there.
Woo. You gotta write that. That's gotta be a quote. I don't
So,
exactly know what that means, but it's
okay, I put it in these terms. You're in a theater play. There's a curtain, or you're at a art show and there's a veil over a sculpture. You can't really make out the outline of the sculpture,
right,
but you know there's something there. Or
right,
you're at a magic show. You know there's something there. You
right,
don't know what, but your mind says there is some dash thing there. Some, I don't know what, but a thing, not no
right.
thing, not nothing. So the fact that your mind could even do that lets you know
Do that
that there's
trick.
at least a possibility that there's something there. So that's the thing I always want to remind people. But I was doing that talk. I was talking about why do we have this infinity symbol to represent this thing we can't even get to, and then I was, why do we have like the number 0? You can't divide by 0. That was the whole thing they were talking about. Why do we have 0? It's weird. You
Yeah,
can't
I
even
got
use
to
it.
that part.
So I was just thinking. I was like, so I had this thought. I was like, think about it. Numbers are like containers for infinity. I was like, you're never going to get to infinity, but these numbers kind of allow you to take a scoop out of infinity. Like you dip it into the well of infinity. Like, ooh, one infinity, 2 infinity,
Right.
3. It's like you're never going to get there, but at least you can kind of
Yeah.
grasp it. At least you can get a. And I was thinking, I said a similar thing about creativity. It's like creativity is infinite. It's never runs out. So when you make a sculpture, a song, like you're always capturing a bit of creativity. It's always there. So I was like, oh man, yeah, infinity and creativity, they're on the same, in the same wavelength. And for me, obviously, I always connect that with God. I'm like, well, God is infinite. He's creativity. He's love. He's true. Like he's infinite everything. So he's all parallel version, of all those things. So the infinity and the creativity, it all makes sense to me. But the main point of my talk, I was like, okay, so we live in this 3-dimensional, we've talked about this before. We live in a 3-dimensional world and we want to measure things. And I said this to you once. It's like, well, I think the main reason we have measurement is because in order to have a meaningful existence, you need to be able to define certain edges while we're here. Right? Like if I had to think about infinity, I would just be frustrated. I put it in these terms. Like if I was running a race and I kept seeing my coach every 10 feet, but he never told me or she never told me it's 10 feet. It's like, how am I doing, coach? Just keep running. How far have I come? Just keep going. But how much distance have I like covered? You haven't. You're just going for, like, I would just be so frustrated because I'm trying to be a finite person in an infinite with an infinite, mentality. So we need that limitation just because we are limited. Like simply because we are limited people, limited beings, those limits help give us a sense of definition, meaning. It's literally that simple. It's like because we live in a limited world, we need limits. I know that sounds like
No,
sounds
you're
like
speaking my language. No, it's. I mean, they got to that point in the video. They got, which I was happy to see. They got up to where they were describing limits. They were doing sort of a cursory overview of the idea. You've had calculus, so you understand the importance of limits. And they used a very nice representation that I've also used with my son, which is a great one for people to visualize or think about if you haven't. And this is sort of, I gave a different spin on it than the way they gave it, but they almost did the same thing. They're like, I do it like this. Let's say you have a container that contains 1 gallon, right? And you have successively small containers going down, so you got half a gallon, half of a gallon, and so forth, right? And by the way, half of a gallon is a quart. And, you just keep going down, and they have all these convenient names for them, right? Pint and cup
right.
and half cup, blah, 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 right? Um, will you ever be able to empty out the container if you only pour half of it out? So in other words, if you fill up the next container down, which is exactly half. So imagine that all those containers, and you fill up that container, and then you have to stop. And then you fill up the next container, and you have to stop. And you think about it for a little while, and you'd be like, let me ask it another way. If I already have 1 full and I filled up all those containers, would I ever get to 2? That's kind of how they presented in the video, for lack of better words, just to make it a little visual. And the answer is no. You'd get everyone wants to say, yeah. I mean, because technically, what do we mean by fill? I mean, yeah, it's at some point our eyes go, that's full. But that's the whole point to me. It's like at some point our eyes say something that isn't necessarily true. So the concept of infinity comes into place there is that, you keep zooming in. You asked me to give you 2 cups or 2 gallons, and I only gave you half. Then you said, okay, I only need half of a half, but I gave you half of that. And so every time you asked for a cup, I gave you half. Every time you asked for half, I gave you a fourth. Every time you asked for a fourth, I gave you an eighth and a 16th and a 32nd and a 64th and a 128 and a 256 and a 512 but it goes on and on. It's never going to get there. You're going to get really, really, really close. And it's like, well, there's got to be a symbol that represents whenever this thing is underpinning our math.
Right.
And it turns out that that symbol is very useful as an idea when we want to try to get to stuff that's very, very big or stuff that's very, very small, and it rears its head. So I asked my son the same question. I said, he was trying to say, like, he's dealing with that right now in school. And they're like, he goes, Daddy, is infinity the biggest thing? And I was like, it's an idea for it. And he's like, well, what about infinity plus one? And I was like, oh, yeah, it's a good point. And I said, did you know there's different sizes of infinity? He's like, yeah.
Interesting.
I was like, think about all the numbers from 0 to 1. And he paused, and I was like, all the fractions from 0 to 1, because I can have 0.111111112,
Right.
0.1114,
Interesting.
0.18736. But I can just create any numbers I want all the way to infinity just for the numbers from 0 to 1. So which is bigger, the ones from 0 to 1 or the ones from 0 to 2? And he's like, oh, and it hit him. And he was like, oh, he goes, so that could be like a really big, and that was Cantor who did all that math, Gregor Cantor.
Interesting.
He went crazy thinking about this kind of stuff, and it's because it's quasi real, it's
Right.
quasi, it's not, you think about it, you can dismiss it, but then you can miss the hidden jewel, if you will, and the usefulness of what this will take you to later in different mathematics that has enabled us to do things like we're doing right now, be on a show like this,
Right.
so it's if you follow it out and don't get tricked by the burdensome nature of it or the weirdness of it, it'll take
Right.
you to the promised land, for a lack of better words. And then amazing things can happen when you follow it out. So I think those concepts are cool. I think they're worth investigating. It helps our clarity, helps our metaphor building, helps us understand things that we thought that were previously out of our reach. And that's why when someone's really dumbing it down for you and they say, hey, let me give you a little model, I'm like, please don't. Like, someone's like, oh, let me draw it off. And you're like, no, I'm good. If I'm not, I'll ask for it. I'm very cool,
Right.
it's being like, hey,
Right.
yeah, draw that out. There's sometimes someone saying, they'll do math for me in my class, my students will, and they'll say like 8 numbers in a row. I'm like, whoa, I can't follow you past the third one. They're like, well, I thought you're a mathematician. Yeah, but you're creating your world in your head and throwing it at me super fast. You have it pictured. You're communicating it to
Right.
someone else. So when someone goes, yeah, when I'm taking the square root of a number, and let's say there's like 30 degrees over here, and then I multiply it by 4, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's not
Right.
that I can't follow. It's that you have an idea in your head that you're not using the exact correct words that would
Right.
resonate in this world. So I can't follow all that.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a whole nother conversation. But just to briefly touch on it, said, I guess I probably do that a lot to people because, like, yeah, I have all these things which I've built a whole city inside of myself. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, this is the Mecca, this is the capital, this is this, and like, I just don't really want to have to like describe my whole city to you. I was
Yeah,
like, you just
can't
need
you
to
just
be
understand it?
be in my head because
Yep.
I've already done the work. I gotta explain it to you but yeah, I mean that gets into the whole communication thing, like we always talk about, obviously with introverts, of like taking the thing in your head, making it go connect with your lips, and then putting it to the word. That's why you need a metaphor, right? That's why I think metaphors are the expedited thing. It's like, hey guys, there's a lot, so let me just tell you, like a meme, joke, rap. Like that's why you need art. That's why you need things like poetry,
You do.
music, metaphors, things that make them concise. Because when people hear, they're like, oh,
Yeah,
or
you need art for fractions. I mean, you have to draw it. No, kids don't get fractions until you draw the pictures. Do a
and
half plus a fourth. I mean, draw that out.
well, because
What's
the
that
other
look
thing,
like?
because okay, so internal imagination, right? Like here's one of the key points I always bring up. So your logic is imaging, but then your imagination is imagining. So just that little change of the word, imaging to imagining. So the difference between those two is like when you imagine something, you're injecting it with that unique creative ingredient, which is you, your personal, unique, subjective point of view. So if I say, "Hey, everybody, look at the sun," everybody would say, "Oh yeah, the sun. I know what it is." But Pro's going to think about the sun from when he was 5, like, "Oh yeah, man, on the beach, blah blah." Someone else is going to think about the sun from when they were 12. Like everybody has their own experience of what the sun is. Like they don't think of just the sun; they think about the sun through their own lens. So when you start bringing in your internal imagination, you're also bringing in your internal world and
Mm-hmm.
emotions and who you are,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why that translation is needed, because that's the one thing that only you own, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the only thing, that's the one thing no one else has access to but you. Like if I could feel as you, we would need empathy. I would
Right.
just be you, right?
Right.
So when you get emotions involved, you need what you need these containers to, like I was saying, numbers are containers for infinity. That's why you need art as a container, as a sort of a wrapper. And that's why, as I was telling somebody one time, I was like, if you think about meaning, words are the wrappers for meaning. It's like a piece of candy. You take a word, I got to put a wrapper on this, or a package, whatever, however you want to look at it. That's why you need the creative arts, because if you're going to convey emotion and not just information, people are like, I don't get it. You're trying to convey like pure Bernard. Like you have to translate it. So a reason I brought up that, because I remember I did a poem for this event one time, and this woman, she was doing something. I forgot what her job was. I don't know, like working. I think she was from Africa, but she was doing something up near London or something. And
Mm-hmm.
I did this poem about following your passion, and she was like, "Wow," she's like, "You really know how to put words to emotions." And I did that. It just stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "Wow, like you words to emotions." Because she was saying like her family didn't understand why she was doing what she did. They thought she'd just become a doctor, like they expected her to be. But she's like, "No, this is what I want to do." Like you really captured like what I feel, and so that stuck with me, because I thought, oh, I was like, that's why you need poets and poetry, because all of us feel a similar sentiment. But when you hear a poet put it into certain phrases and rhythm and concise, precise language, you're like, you're reading my mind now. I can't do that. You're like when someone, there's a good poet on stage, someone's like, you, yes, yes, that, yes,
Mm-hmm.
oh yes,
I
that word.
can't say it, but you
It's
said
like,
it.
yeah, they know it. It's like they know it
Yeah.
intuitively, but the poet took the organizing of the thought.
Or the comedian, right? Like, I
Right.
mean, I don't know if you saw Chappelle on Saturday
Yeah,
Night Live
I watched
recently.
it.
I mean, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's just like it's the encapsulation of a take on something that you kind of, it depends to which degree. Uh, Obviously, you're going to hear a comedian is going to be like, it might be your percentage might be 50 to 100 of what you agree on, what you don't, right?
Right.
But I find myself laughing at poets, I should say comedians, that I don't agree with everything that they're saying, and it's kind of what makes me laugh, because it's this awkwardness. Like Chappelle is a master at that. Chappelle will say stuff that you should not be thinking,
Right.
right? But or stuff things. What he does is for me anyways, and again it might be different for you or somebody else. He vacillates between what I am thinking and what I'm not thinking, but that which I can stretch to. I can say, man, I can see exactly how he'd think that, and then I find
Right.
myself laughing. Go, how did you say that? You know what I mean? Like when he said there's two words I just don't say. I mean,
Right.
it was just those weren't the two I was thinking. But then when I watched it again, I was like, it's so clear those are going to be the two words. But the brilliance of that is the timing, the setup. He
Right.
doesn't reveal too much, and then clearly after you watch it, you go, of course I know what the two words are going to be. And he's talking about Kanye. I mean, just the fact that you're obviously going to come out and talk about Kanye when you're someone who's talked about Kanye before, there's
Right.
sort of an expectation that you better be on point with it. And even the fact that monologue is longer because it's Dave Chappelle, he's able to elaborate on it. They give him that
Right.
respect, right? And he just hits some brilliant points that are timely in a way that only he can kind of get away with. And so you find yourself going, what he said. And then sometimes it's funny how the comedian can become what we think. Like we'll go, what Chappelle said,
Right.
or what Saul Williams said, or, what Rakim said, like I find myself resonating. Like I can name artists that I resonate with. It's not the way they do their music, because like I can name one of the people I resonate more with anyone in the world is Lauryn Hill. And now I clearly don't do what Lauryn Hill does, but Lauryn Hill to me is unbelievable the way that she taps in on the emotion of the song, but it's how
Right.
she emotes it. It's how she physically moves to it. The tone she uses, like you said, the obviously the rhythm, the words that you're doing, the emotion that whether she's playing the instrument or on stage and moving, she communicates and sells that idea like to me like perfectly, you know, and on like what she said. That's what I think about that song. You know, I can almost use her as a reference. Be like, oh, what do you think about when she's talking to young girls, and I was like that. She's
Right.
like that's it. There's how often can we do that? There's an artist out there that we say, you know what they think is exactly how I feel about that. But I think a lot of times, if people haven't given themselves that introvert, introspective time to understand what they think, they're going to be feeling that way all the time, as opposed to when I'm shocked and excited when I do. I get excited and giddy when somebody feels exactly the same way I do on something, because I'm not used to that, because I've usually thought about the subject ahead of time. But I have to admit, like even watching the Chappelle thing, I hadn't paid that much attention to the level of which I usually do on current events, to exactly everything that Kanye said and all the repercussion and all the
Right.
Kyrie. I'm pretty up on it. Like, I pretty much know. But I didn't watch the Drink Champs episode. I didn't, you know what I mean? It's like I know what happened. I got the gist.
Right.
I understand. But, then I'm like, oh, okay. That really pinpoints it for me. And it goes back to everything we're saying. It's like his visual, his three-dimensional, I'm up here. Imagine if you're at the show. You're going to even have a different experience from that. And, but luckily we do have the TV, and I'm like, yo, now I want to go investigate more.
Right.
That's
Right.
powerful. That's powerful when those all those emotions and senses can make you want to go check in on something more than you did. I want to show you this cover too. Pulled up behind me. It's a math book. Here's looking at Euclid. Here's looking at
Here's
Euclid.
looking at
Right.
Euclid.
And look at you. He's made out of all numbers. Looking like
Nice.
Humphrey Bogart.
Interesting.
And it's an amazing book. And my wife, I give credit to my wife. She got this back
Uh,
in 2010 when I was still super cool. To my dear husband, I searched high and low for this amazing book. After reading an excerpt, math doesn't seem so bad after all. Merry Christmas in the Dominican Republic. Love you. Blah blah blah. Right. So my wife's not a big, huge math person, but
right.
this book has you can already tell from the cover. That cover mattered. Like this cover sets you up for the fact that this is going to be a fun excursion through mathematics. And she took the time, I think, because of this cool cover, to look at it. And what do you know? Like right in the beginning, oh, you can't really see that; it's too bright. But there's pictures and all kinds of stuff in there that walk you through and different methods, and you can see some of them. I do the dark ones there. You can see that there's different ways to uh, imagine things, and it's like, yeah, that's a cool book. Like it got me, and the picture did take that person to want to get that book, because here's the difference. Look at this book without the cover. Here's just that little cover. Here it is. How's that look? Does that look like a book you want? It's a math book, and it has nothing, right? But now it has a sleeve, and when you look at the cover title of this, here's looking at Euclid. I mean, almost don't even care to even look. You just see Euclid and blah blah
Right.
blah. You could miss the joke, you know. So
Right.
I thought that was a good one.
Well, yeah. I mean, well, as we wrap it up, the last things I'll say is, yeah. I mean, I think it's a good thing to like kind of tie it all together, which is okay. I mean, especially as introverts, I will say. I mean, we talk about this all the time. The sort of like, I don't care what you think or what I look like mentality, which is true. Like, I in general don't really. I'm not dressing for aesthetic. I'm dressing for comfort. Now, if other people perceive me that way, I mean that's something that's
Perceive you which way?
like, oh, he doesn't dress like I think a person should
Oh, okay.
dress, or like
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't dress in a manner which I think is societally
All right, but how would you dress to go
standard.
to a wedding though?
If I didn't really didn't care, I would just like I'm dressed now
All
because
right,
I'm just
it's a family wedding, and your parents are going to be there.
again. if I really, 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 really didn't care. You see this what I have on? Like, I'm about comfort. When I was little, my mom, I would try to wear whatever the school said. You got to look presentable. I was
Right.
like, I'm going to school. Like, who
But
am
you
I
say,
presenting myself?
what does it mean though if you didn't care? Like I'm saying,
If I'm saying
imagine.
I did, okay, if I was able to 100% detach my emotions from
Oh
any kind of
well, hey, I'm with you. I'd be the dressiest
connection,
too.
no, because it was gonna happen.
I'm
Like,
pissed off every day when I can't.
the thing is, here's the problem when you're introvert. You're also very empathetic, a lot of times. So even though I don't care, I'm going into the wedding knowing that they care.
They
So I
care, right?
care. I
Right.
don't necessarily care what they think about me.
Right.
I care that
Gonna be grief.
they're gonna have they're gonna care enough to get on my nerves.
Yep.
Like, they're gonna care enough to like talk to me now or later about it.
Yep.
And I'm just like, so a part of you kind of says, all right, let me just do this to keep them quiet.
Right.
But regardless of all that, I don't really care about aesthetics of my personal appearance, because I'm like, why are you looking at me anyway? Like, that's number one. Why are you looking at me anyway? There's other stuff to look at. Unless you're trying to ask me on a date, don't look at me. But I care about other aesthetics, like we talked about, like when, like, if the stage was not set a certain way, if I was performing, or if I made a video and then somebody, like I did have this one time, I made a video and then somebody, they showed the video but they compressed it and converted it and it just looked horrible, and I was like, I didn't put all this work into editing and filming, and you just compressed it, and now it's like, it looks like might as well not have done it. So I understand they have a version, certain people have a version of how they look, and so I have my version. I just don't care about the aesthetic part. But the in between of that is like, I do have to acknowledge that all of us as humans do care about the aesthetics,
right?
The beauty. I mean, especially beauty. I'm like a connoisseur of beauty. I'm always trying to find beauty everywhere. So it's not that I don't care about looks. It's not that I don't care about beauty or aesthetics. There's only certain aesthetics that I really think are important. Because
You don't care about the aesthetics you provide for other people.
Yes, thank you. I don't care about aesthetics I provide for other people. I don't care about their expectation of the aesthetics that I should be providing for them. Because I think there's so much more other beautiful things to be worried about. Like when people are like, oh man, look at your shoes. I'm like, oh man, look at this nebulous star from the new telescope. Like, that's what I want to direct your attention to, the glory of the heavens, not of like my shoes. I was like, this is the most boring thing as far as I can. So there's so much other things to talk about. I was like, oh, did you see the new photons? They just, like, I'd much rather talk to you about. Though I tell you, most beautiful thing I ever seen, one of them seen. Somebody posted these pictures once of a photographer who took pictures of horse embryos. It was like, I was like having chills. I was like, I didn't even know you could get in there and do that. But you're just looking at this, it's surreal. I'm like, to me, this is what I want to talk about. I want to put a picture of that in front of students. Like, did y'all see these horse embryos? Like,
what do they look like?
Just look them up later. Look them up later. But it's just like one of these things when you see them. I don't know. There's something kind of, I guess, majestic about horses. And so when you see them very like small and innocent, you're just like, wow, like this is kind of. I don't know. It was a very innocent, intimate.
I think it's that horses are always there with your majesty at the castle. It's just it's the association, right?
Or maybe you're just so used to seeing like a child embryo, and then when you see a horse embryo, you're just like, oh, this is something. So stuff like that amazes me. And so when people want to talk to me about what I'm wearing or the weather, I'm like, are you kidding me? There's like a million other topics literally that should be on your list of things to talk about, but you want to talk to me about aesthetics. But anyways. The only reason I say that is because I have to acknowledge that we all care on some level about the external, right? Like if I find someone attractive, I will probably want to go talk to them now because of how they looked. So I'm not utterly opposed or like unaware of the
how
external.
dare you look presentable.
Right. But it doesn't stop me. Like, right, if I find you're interesting, I will still talk to you. I'm like, oh man, this person's really fascinating. Like, here's what I find interesting, because I used to hear, girls say like, oh man, it could be a guy, I'm not too attracted to him, but as I get to know him, become more attracted. I'm like, I don't know how y'all do that, because that doesn't work for me. But as an introvert, I kind of get that in terms of friendships. Like, there's some people who from like on the outside, I'm like, oh, you just look uninteresting, or you just look like your life is boring. But then when I started talking to him, I was like, oh man, I'm starting to kind of
Uh,
attracted to you as a friend. I kind of like you. You changed my mind about you. You were really
I
boring.
I tell you, I say the opposite to people all the time. I get that all the time. It's such a great, like, it sounds like a wonderful pickup line. People are like, your life sounds so interesting. I'm like, I am so boring. Like, if you only knew, like, because they'd never see the extrovert coming. You know what I mean?
Right,
And I mean, the introvert coming. They just see an extrovert. You know, and so they're like, oh, your life is gonna be like, you're on a hang glider, and it's like, no, I'm scared of heights. Let's start there.
I get that too. Like
Yeah.
when I think about how I probably look to other people, I'm
Yes.
like, oh, I probably look boring to you. But like, but if you were inside of my head right now, you'd be like, I can't even handle this person.
Yeah, but I'm
Like,
the other. I'm the other. Well, yeah, I'm like, if you were in my head, if you knew,
yeah,
like, after a while, you're gonna find out I'm on some stuff. But at first, you're thinking I'm going to be doing some stuff that's amazing.
right,
No, 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 no. I'm not doing things that are amazing, like, what I might be reading or thinking about or writing and creating. Yes, but I'm pretty
right,
much sitting right here. You know what I'm saying? Or I'm walking in this very short radius. Occasionally, I'll take a random drive or a random walk or whatever, but I'm not doing much that's outside of what you publicly see. Like, what would you expect
right.
a professor rapper to do? I'm professing and
And
rapping.
it,
I'm not like going to the Bahamas to look for indigenous fruits to, put on my wall or anything. Like,
right.
it's not.
See, but I think though that really gets into the self relationship of the introvert, because I know that some people probably perceive me as like, oh, what do you do? That's like, I had some students, they were like, you sound really boring, Mr. Hankins. I was like, please. I was like, I have the most interesting life in the world. I was like every day I'm making music, I'm making beats, like I'm teaching kids how to, I'm excited, I love
No, I'm
me.
excited by me. Right, right, right,
I
right.
love me. Like
Right.
I can't wait to get home and talk to me.
Yeah.
I know to you all, it's like,
Right.
and plus that's where they were in their life, where everything is about how you look and your friends and who you're
Yeah.
hanging with. I was like, so that's whole, like three other layers on top of just the average adult would have. uh Sorry, not average, no one's average, the everyday adult. I hate saying average,
Yeah.
but okay, but yeah, just like I was saying, to close that up, I was, yeah, I mean, aesthetics, external do matter, so I do acknowledge it, and I do try to play to people now. So, like I said, if I'm doing a pitch, a presentation, I understand that they might need something to hold their attention, even though it frustrates me that I have to like do something to grab their attention in a certain way. It's like, okay, I'm gonna give you the picture so you can give me the money for this grant that I need.
Yeah.
Rather than be like, well, you should be able to imagine it.
Well,
I was
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah. It's and I said to you, which we experienced there. I mean, here's the top three questions you're going to get. Like, how much money do you have? Are you rich? Essentially, right? Is what's frontal lobe for kids. Who do you know that's famous? And like, what how many people were at the show that you did? Like, those kind of things. It's like
right,
they're so wired into the numbers, and not to say
right,
that we're not as well. Um, we know, like, I know how many followers I have or whatever. I generally want to say I don't care, but clearly I care because I know how many I have, and I'm like,
right,
it would be weird if I had 57 followers, like a lot of people. Like, I go onto Clubhouse and someone's talking amazingly, and they've been on for a year, and I look at the page and they have 90 people following them. I'm like, okay, what weird thing do they do that turns people off so much? Right?
right,
There's a certain number you expect. Like, if you don't, like, if you've been on Instagram for 2 years and you have 26 friends, it's like, okay, so you are an introvert, right? First and foremost. Or when you talk to people, you have no ability to connect with them, or you're just not trying to. And then when you see them in the real world, and then you can start making these holistic pictures. So I get what students are saying when they haven't met you. It's actually a compliment, because what'll happen is, if let's say they hear Bernard, and he walks into a room and they hear you, they're going, your skill level is like a 10, but
right,
now they're looking at your appearance and they're like, okay, he
right,
clearly doesn't care, like a lot of people who are tens. So now
right.
they have to ask you the question, why are you not more famous than
Yeah,
your skill level? So the question
right,
is, how rich are you? Like, do you? And so they start looking at. Remember that girl? She was like, oh, look at his bag, he's rich. And
right,
it's like, but I know that too, and it's part of the con job that I also want to talk to them about. It's like, I know how society is, so at some point, I probably do need a bag that's representative of the level of success that I
right,
actually have, because you're not going to necessarily see it on my Instagram page.
Right.
If you think 1,000 or 2,000 followers is successful, great. But there's make pretend people out there that have 47,000. They're paying for all that kind of stuff. They have 200,000, or maybe some of them are real, and so they maybe that's reflective on that particular app or whatever. And on my SoundCloud, it's pretty reflective, right? Like I got one song has 188,000 views and there's like 400 comments or whatever. And that might be a good enough sign for the student to say, that's what I expected after I heard you perform. But then I went
Right.
on your Twitter page and there's 27 people, something doesn't match. So it's not,
See,
I think that the match is there and they want to know, should I follow your path? Because you
right,
can't knock them if money is important in their life.
right,
So it's like, I want to tell you that this is a pathway for you. Like for me, I'm trying to say real quickly that I still think education's worth it if you can freak the system, cheat the system, get your education paid for, learn as much as you can in life, be original, be you, be creative, put it together. Reward will come for you if you're generally a good person. The end. So I can't be broke. You know what I'm saying? And
right.
it's like I can't be whack. I need to be good. I need to be successful, and I need to be able to show it to you in a way without trying to flaunt it in your face. Because I'm not trying to say you should do this to be rich. I'm trying to say if
Right.
you like this path, you don't have to go chase the name your favorite rapper of the day path, which we're talking about all self-destructive, and it's essentially the minstrel shows. You know what I mean? So it's like you don't have to necessarily choose that path.
Well, the last thing I'll say, I mean, yeah, I mean, one, I would say, I was thinking about this today or recently. I always think about this, but there's also that tension of like the people who are working usually don't care what they look like because they're working,
Right.
right? I mean, there's a certain level of like, I'm down here digging a hole. I don't have time to look
Yes.
good, right?
Yeah.
So that's like that version of it. But even to the people who are creatives, like myself, I'm like, I really don't care what I look like because I'm just trying to wake up and make as much creativity as possible. And if that means saving a little time to keep on the same clothes, then so be. I mean,
Right.
like Elizabeth Holmes, who just got sentenced to 11 years in jail. They were like one of the reasons I think she said it in a documentary. She's like, I just wear the same turtleneck every day because if that's one less thing I have to think about to get my company off, and so be. I was like, I get it. If I just woke up and I had the same outfit, I'm like if
Yep.
no one really cared, I mean, I probably still, I don't know. I thought about this. I was like, could I wear the same clothes every day? I think I could because I wouldn't really care. But it goes back
I've
to the
definitely wore the same clothes 2 days in a row, and I mean the whole get up now. And I'm not happy about it. Like I'm not like I'm like, man, it'd really be good. Like sometimes I'll be like, if I could just get home and take a shower right now, I'd feel so much better about life. So
I don't
there's
even mean
this.
shower. I just mean if I literally had the same 5 outfits,
Yeah, no, I know
like
what you're
that
saying.
you would wash. Like, do I
No, but I'm
really
saying
care?
I'm up to 3 in the morning, and I'm like, man, do I even need to change now before I drive to the gym again? I'm going to the gym. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like,
But like, yeah, it's more. I think I guess in some ways you could say it's like a math equation. You're like, okay, if I wear the same outfits, people can keep bugging me, and I'm gonna waste time talking to them. So does putting on
right,
this different outfit prevent me from that? But eventually, people would stop caring. Oh, it's a guy with the same outfit, whatever. So there's that too. Like some people, they see oh, your Instagram's low, or look at your clothes. It's like because I'm working. Like, I mean, if
mm,
people say, how come you don't have a lot of Instagram followers? Because I don't have time to be on Instagram. I dump a bunch of word plays when I have
I,
them because I'm working on the word plays. So I would promote that too. But the last thing I was gonna say was like, yeah, I need to come up with a term for this. I guess you could call it like the empathy conversion or something. But this it's the idea that, like I said, I can't deny that I in some areas of my life pay attention to aesthetics. So when someone else does, I can't be like, oh, that's wrong. I just be like, wait a minute. If you presented to me a product that looked like trash in the store, I'm probably not going to buy it if I'm honest. Like if the box is falling apart, I want something that looks nice. So understanding that about myself, it's helped me to change to be like, okay, there I'm not being fake or surface to care about aesthetics or how the cover looks or how I present it. It's just me being aware that I too have some version of that in my own life. So it's somewhat on aesthetics, on the external.
right. Speaking of aesthetics, what's aesthetics?
I don't know.
You don't know what aesthetics means?
No.
Oh, your shirt are aesthetics. It's how something looks.
Oh, now I remember.
Yeah, it's how something looks. So your shirt has some cool aesthetics. What shirt is that?
It's a John Adams shirt.
Yes, it is.
Whee!
He's wearing a very nice John Adams shirt. I am wearing a Pro House of Lies hoodie
Whee!
that says my website on the back. So I have to be concerned. right? We're talking about people what they wear and think, and if you do you like when you read a book, do you want there to be a lot of pictures or just a few pictures?
A few pictures.
A few pictures? How come?
Because I like reading more than actually looking at pictures.
Ah, okay. He likes reading more actually than seeing the actual pictures.
Woo!
Cool. Well, my son is reminding me that it's time to go.
Hello.
We are done. We are right on.
We are done. All right. Whoops, my power just died in this headphone, so I officially right now can't hear Bernard. You can tell me what he's saying. What's he saying?
Okay. He isn't saying anything right now.
He's not?
No.
Oh, let's see if this one can hear him.
Check.
Yeah,
I think that's
you hear him
it.
say check?
I'm waiting for it to say Bluetooth connect. Wait. All right, now say it.
Check.
Check. I heard it that time. All right, now we're there.
All right, well, I'm good to
So
go.
hey, we have a new trick. Bluetooth 3-second delay allows my mic to be normal and not hear the feedback, not have the loop. And I just was always afraid to use the Bluetooth because I thought it was too big of a delay. But it's only a second or two, so I can work with it.
All right. Well, I'll hit you up tomorrow because I got to ask you about the library gig. If that's going to be a go for January, the date. Because I got to let somebody else know about another date.
Me too, because there's been a lack of communication since the last couple of emails, so I got to find out too. Alrighty. Yes.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us on Introverts. We will see y'all whenever we do the next one.
That's right. Peace, y'all.
Thanks, Joe, for joining us on Clubhouse. We'll see you on the next one. Peace.
Later, Joe.
Peace.
Peace.
Peace.